I'm Sarah Nagle. I've spent my career leading research and product development within some of the world's largest brands.
And I'm Chad Reynolds. I'm a serial entrepreneur and founder and CEO of Verve.
And this is AI Powered by People.
Each episode will dive into the latest AI developments and talk to an industry leader to help you better understand and utilize AI.
We'll take you inside some of the world's most famous companies and share examples of how AI is improving innovation, consumer engagement, media, and marketing.
No matter what industry you work in, we'll help you navigate one of the biggest disruptions to organizations and people today.
Hey Chad, how are you doing? What's up?
I'm doing good. Probably better than you're feeling. Like this episode might be sponsored by Dayquil by the time we're through with it.
Yeah. Not feeling so great, but I'm definitely on the mend. But I wanted to ask you, is there more on Google Next? Because this is going to be landing while you're in Vegas.
Next Thursday, or I guess this upcoming Thursday for people that are listening, we'll be announcing on stage V-Team to the world, sharing lots of details around it. Yeah, it'll be on stage at noon Pacific time. So we'll be launching a bunch of notes on notes, videos, the announcement, all that kind of stuff through blogs, LinkedIn, email.
Yes. So
really excited to be out there and get a chance to do it.
Awesome. All right. Well, coming up, we're going to be sharing an interview with Sarah Crockett, who is the innovative global CMO at Nature Sunshine and has an extended past in the outdoor industry, leading marketing for companies such as Dickies, Backcountry, Burton, Snowboards, and REI. But before we get to our interview with Sarah, let's take a look at what's in the headlines. So first up, over 200 artists have signed a petition with the Artist Right Alliance that calls on developers, technology companies, platforms, digital music services to stop using AI to infringe upon and devalue the rights of human artists. Pearl Jam, Nicki Minaj, Billie Eilish, Stevie Wonder, Elvis Costello, and the estate of Frank Sinatra are among the 200 artists who have signed. And the letter opens with, when used irresponsibly, AI poses enormous threats to our ability to protect our privacy, our identities, and our music and our livelihoods. So I'm curious, Chad, kind of what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a complicated issue. I think, I guess if we zoom out a little bit, like this has been a trend that's been happening over the last, decade, 15 years, which is, taking, I guess, creative output and getting it down into more of like a molecular level, where it's like always been about the album, and then iPod comes along and it's necessarily not about the album, it's about the song, and now you're in control of what how you want to experience music, and then from there it's also gone down to like the playlist through like Spotify. So now I can play my own or create my own mix of things. So I mean, this has just been a trend over the last last few years, and so I think this is we're kind of coming into a scenario where consumers want the ability potentially to create their own mixes and things like that. It'll just be interesting how it plays out. I mean, you can see both sides of the story. I mean, the artists are obviously not making a ton of money through Spotify. Very few are. I think the royalty rate is 0.0038 per stream. So it's not, that's not a whole lot of money. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely would be on the side of the artist. I would definitely sign the petition because I think about not only the royalties of the artist, but I think that they're also trying to support young artists that are trying to emerge, and it's really difficult to be found right now. So I think like the Billie Eilishes out there, already have their place in the music industry, and they can fight for these things. But then you think about the artist that wants to be found on from their bedroom on TikTok or on Spotify. It's going to become really difficult. It's also taking away some of the jobs around kind of like mixing, music, and kind of like some of the other technical roles. So, but then I also think about too, as like an artist, the reason you get into it is because you love to sing, you love to create, you love to put things out there. So to me, it's beyond just the royalties and kind of like being paid for, the likeness of my work. It's also just the love of it and being able to create that. And that if that's being replaced by, a non-me or kind of a mix of like, me and another artist, I don't know. It doesn't feel right. It feels like it takes something away from the creativity.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see it on the deep fake side where you're trying to replicate or replace, kind of the instance of the person. But I guess when it comes, if you are trying to create, let's say, like a background track for this pod, you're like, I want it to be in this style, and here are different artists that I love. Have it generate different things kind of in the style, not necessarily use their voice or things like that, but have it create something new from different source material. Now, is that of interest to you? Do you how do you feel like people should be? So one, should that exist? Two, who gets compensated in that scenario?
I feel like definitely they need to be compensated. Whoever the artist was that created the initial kind of, like the piece of music that I'd be kind of remixing in some sort of way or using as source data, they should be compensated. And it may be something very small, like the Spotify, the fractions of a penny or something like that, because that could add up over time. But I don't know, it's depends on where it's coming from. I feel like maybe if it's coming from, a well-established artist, maybe, but then if we're kind of taking that from someone that is just like emerging, it doesn't feel great. It doesn't feel like we're enabling them to get off the ground and become an artist.
I mean, I definitely see the point on like George Carlin, stand-up episode like that. For me, crossed many lines.
Yeah.
Of what seemed appropriate. Now, if it was their state doing it, that was a different story. But I think taking influence from lots of different things, just like we do as humans, we go, if you're going through Pinterest boards and going to art galleries, you're hearing things. I mean, you're really creating out of this influence from all these different inspiration sources. So you're not trying to copy. I mean, I know people might be trying to copy or create kind of fakes of these things.
Yeah.
That's like a different intent. But I'd say like from the other types of intent that you might have or what you're trying to produce, are those okay? Are those things that you think people want to do, or there could be an experience around them to enable that to happen? And is that fundamentally different than what this petition is trying to prevent? Like, I understand, like, you don't want others to co-opt your image, your material. Like, you want to be I mean, at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to money. Like, is there a financial structure in place to reward you for the work that you create? Right? So sign a petition, protect, make it clear, like, you're not okay with your stuff being taken, just kind of early days of Napster, right? It's like, you don't want your stuff pirated. That was more of a problem, not necessarily for the artists. It was really for the music industry, because there was no revenue model in place to reward mostly the labels. But now we're in the Spotify age. It's like the Spotification of creative content, and it is was it fractions of a penny are going to the artist, and it's similar through TikTok. But as an up and coming artist, like, how do you get discovered? Are you coming up with different kinds of sounds, music experiences, kind of giving people a different way to experience music? I don't know. I don't see it slowing down. So,
no, I don't either. Maybe I'm just makes me sad because I like people don't play instruments
I'm the one
anymore.
that's supposed to be sad.
What? I know.
This
is what we're switched. I don't know. There's, like people aren't playing instruments the same way that they used to. They're not kind of like as technical as they used to. We're like auto-tuning everything. It feels like the artistry is like being stripped away more and more and more. And this just feels like one additional piece of it that's just stripping it away from the artist. So it doesn't feel good. It also, I read somewhere, like signing the petition is like signing the petitions so the sun won't come up tomorrow. Like, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's just like, we just need to create or set regulations or some sort of like limits to what the technology can do, because
Yeah.
otherwise it's going to completely erode the
Yeah.
creativity of the artists that are talented and should be creating music.
Or it's going to create opportunities for, I mean, you want to go to a concert. You want to hear the full story
Mm-hmm.
that they had to share. You didn't want it to be synthetically created, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I've just seen kind of the flip side actually happening, where people want to be in person. They want to go to more shows than ever.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be together with other people. They want the emotion. They want the backstory of like, why did you write this song? What was it about? What were you thinking about? They want to feel it. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that'll always ring true. I think it'll continue. That trend will continue to grow over the next few years, even as AI advances.
Yeah.
Because there's so many different use cases for music where I'm not necessarily trying to replicate or replace, do a deep fake of someone with like ill intent. That was just me. But I also think it's interesting to create, songs like in the style of, multiple inspirational sources. Again, not with their vocals over top or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I don't possess the superpowers to, like, I'm not a musician and I can't
Mm-hmm.
create these things on my own. But it makes me appreciate music more and appreciate the artistry and their stories more.
Mm-hmm.
In a byproduct of that. Now,
Yeah.
how everybody gets compensated in that's for another episode.
And that's for another episode. Well, we'll agree to disagree for right now, because I still
But
listen
are we
to.
disagreeing? I don't know if we
Well,
are.
I feel like we are. Like I feel like we should be pushing back on this more than we are, and I don't, and maybe it's just because I don't like DJs and actually listen to like records all the way through. So that could be part of it. So, well, moving on. Google is considering charging for AI-powered searches. So Google is reportedly drawing up plans to charge for AI-enhanced search services, which will be one of the biggest shakeups to the company's revenue model in history. What do you think, Chad?
This is going to be tough. Would you pay for search? After all these years of getting search for free, would you pay for search?
I don't know. I've been going through like all of these, like kind of through Reddit
Come
and other
on
places.
now.
People are like freaking out. Like they do not want to pay for Google search.
No. I mean, this feels like, I don't know if you remember Wendy's when they announced their, I guess they were experimenting with pricing, and then it came across as surge pricing, which is like a terrible PR approach to it.
Yeah.
Because that's not necessarily what it was. It was just giving you extra discounts for buying things at a different time, which is like, oh, that's kind of cool. Yeah, just the whole idea of paying for search just feels very, I don't know.
I wonder if
I don't
this
see
is-
myself doing it.
I don't see myself doing it either. And I also, I wonder if this is like Google's way of doing research. Like they leaked it and they want to like see either how much they can charge, like what people are saying, and then they can like scrape all this information and understand kind of like where they're going to
Maybe.
stand with people. Because it's allegedly, everything is like allegedly, they're maybe going to do this, like nothing that said, concretely that they're going to be charging. But so I'm curious about that too.
No, it's funny. We back in the day when I was doing a lot of work with Procter P&G, we would create these fake press releases and leave them in the cafeteria at P&G of, hey, this is what's happening with this brand. And it was just funny to see people's reactions of like, kind of like seeding innovation ideas through the company to get people to talk, start to shift the mindset around like what people traditionally thought of as a brand or what this brand could be capable of. And it was a really interesting experiment that we did of like, how do we seed, how do we switch the mindset for disruptive innovation, all these types of things. Like, yes, we could have a workshop. Yes, we could train people. Or what if we put together these press releases that are made people think differently?
Yeah.
Kind of put them in different places.
It's kind of like when we do the in workshops sometimes where you have people think about like what the future is going to look like. You do like the headline exercise.
Yeah.
But that's like real, you're actually putting it out into the world to understand how people are going to react to what that headline is. So there's,
Yeah.
some research involved in that too. I think that's awesome. So
Yeah. I mean,
maybe that's what this is.
it might be, yeah. I mean, it might be, but it's also definitely a reaction to like what's happening. I mean, you have like Perplexity that's trying to build a better search experience by giving you the answer, and then because that's what we're kind of doing sometimes for search is like I want like very specific types of questions answered, but then sometimes you also are just trying to discover lots of different information just to see what's out there.
Yeah.
I feel like there's kind of different modes that you're going through search that it's really hard to pinpoint and say, no, I always want an answer to what I'm searching for. I don't know. It'd be really hard to charge people for it.
Okay, now let's get to our interview with Sarah Crockett. Sarah is the Global Chief Marketing Officer for Nature's Sunshine, which is a natural health and wellness company that manufactures and sells natural and personal care products. Prior to Nature's Sunshine, she was the Global CMO at Dickies, CMO at Backcountry, and Burton Snowboards. She's an innovative leader, and I'm really excited to hear about what she has to say about how she's using AI. And she's just a pretty awesome person, so I'm excited to chat with her. You ready?
You ready to go?
Ready to go. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for joining the podcast. It's really great to see you again.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, you're currently the Global CMO of Nature's Sunshine, but previously you were the Global CMO at Dickies, CMO at Backcountry, board member of a number of companies. You also worked at Vans prior, REI. I'd love to hear about your current role at Nature's Sunshine. Tell us a bit about the company, your role, and why you're excited to work with them, because you recently joined them.
Yeah, I'm just about 6 months into this journey. So yeah, let me start by telling you a little bit about who Nature's Sunshine is. So we're a 52-year young supplement brand, which is pretty exciting if you think about the supplement space. And 52 years, usually people think of it as a much more modern, recent industry. But we were founded here and actually in the greater Salt Lake area, based on the premise of trying to figure out how to consume these herbs that could actually be really good for our bodies, but happen to taste terrible. So we actually were sort of the founding brand of encapsulating herbs, and that was the birth of our story. Fast forward 52 years later, we're now a publicly traded company, global. We actually have two different brands under the banner of Nature's Sunshine, one called Synergy and then Nature's Sunshine. In the US, we sell over 400 products. So we like to think of ourselves as nature's medicine cabinet, really a herbal botanical forward brand, but really validated by science. So these are products that you will see results from. And I know there's a lot of concerns over snake oil and things of that nature as the space has gotten more crowded. But we are a trusted brand. We do over 600 quality tests to ensure that the efficacy that we are telling our consumers is actually built into the products. And that sounds like a obvious statement for a brand in this space, but it's far less common than people would think. So our goal is to become the most efficacious and household name supplements brand in the world, based on the work and diligence that we put into the products and creating solutions for people's health concerns across the board.
So I was snooping around LinkedIn, and I saw that Kevin Bailey, Kevin Bailey, who is the Chief Transformation Officer at VF, had posted or reposted this Deloitte paper about Gen Z, about how they're breaking the marketing funnel. And I saw that you had commented on basically like people are super distracted, social media, there's a lot going on. And you believe that growth happens through connection versus growth hacking. So I'd love to hear about what that means, but then also, do you think that AI could have a role in helping brands better connect to people?
Yes, so that has been one of the best articles I've read in a long time. I encourage anybody to pick it up and read it. Vogue Business posted it, and that's where I consumed it last week. And yeah, I think really what it tells you is about a generation's behaviors. But the comment to Kevin Bailey A good friend of mine who I've worked with, probably over 15 years now, at this point, was this notion of marketing and how to create the pull relationship that brands are aspiring to create with their consumers and the target consumers. And the traditional funnel of awareness, consideration, conversion is really being challenged and flattened with this upcoming generation. And my comment was, there's a double-edged sword when it comes to marketing for brands. One side is that the field changes. Every 2 years, I feel like I have a different job. So if you go back to our earlier conversation, I'm a very curious person. That keeps me super motivated. That's why I love what I do, because I feel like I'm always learning and evolving. And if I look back at the last 5 to 10 years of our field in marketing, we're doing a bit of a pendulum swing. And I do think technology is a huge factor in this. I think COVID and the push that brought to driving more competition within the digital marketplace as well as the domination that the metas of the world are taking, as well as TikTok. We're seeing consolidation in channels. So people are just fighting for attention. Because great brands can be great brands, but they're not discoverable, then they mean nothing. So our ambition is still the same as it was back in 1900 when brands were trying to connect with consumers. How do I become visible? How do I become relevant? And how do I build customer loyalty? And so I think the technology advancement and the growth in digital has really driven the swing towards growth hacking over the last 5 to 10 years. So how do I use technology and digital to get my leads, pull them in, promotion, incentives, et cetera, right? And using performance marketing as a way to do that as well. And that has been the dominating voice in marketing. And I think what's happening, and what I think part of it's driven by the cookieless world that we're all anticipating coming into the future, as well as greater competition. I believe fundamentally that consumers out there more than ever are looking for brands to become loyal with, that have shared values, that have something to offer to them, something innovative. There's a sea of sameness that dominates about 80% of the brands and products that are in the marketplace. So they are trying to find them as well. So how do you connect with those consumers in a way that drives a deeper relationship with them? Cannot be through growth hacking. It has to be through innovation and through authenticity and through higher touch experiences that may be a thing of the past coming back into the future. And the relationship that AI has in all of this, AI is obviously going to be the dominating technology over the next 5 years at a minimum. It helps shortcut some things, but I don't think it accomplishes the job on its own. I think it's an input. That's how I like to use AI today. I want to use it as, hey, what would the large language models tell me is the right answer to this solution? It's going to give me a direction, but it also offers a frame to innovate around, because if that's where the dominating voices are going, that's going to drive me to the sea of sameness. How do I avoid that and actually leverage my core strengths as a brand to create that differentiation and the genuine connection to consumers that they are looking for? Consumers are very smart. They know when they're being marketed to, and they're not opposed to it necessarily. But I think there's a need for continuous innovation to create the space to drive that visibility and connection.
Are there specific ways that you're experimenting with AI? And these could be very practical applications just within your current role or with a team that you could share.
So on the most basic level, I would say the things that most people are having the opportunity to dig into is through our partner platforms, right? So we do a lot of business with Google. We do a lot of business with Meta. We know that those AI upgrades have happened with those partners. So at the simplest level, there's that. And then in the more nuanced level for our organization, AI is a factor that we're applying to our financial modeling. It's a factor that we're we're applying to our roadmap development. As I mentioned, we're seeing it as an input to guide a lot of our strategies, whether we're leveraging it to lean into or leveraging it to be aware of what is out there in the greater world to ideate around. Product innovation roadmaps, as an example. So we're leveraging tools to help inform our 3-year plans for where we want to go that are not just industry data, but also plugging into these large language models to understand different pathways forward.
Got it. So are you using, I guess, just LLMs that are like off the shelf, or are you also experimenting just with like training your own or using more of like open source type of models?
Today, it's an off the shelf as a proof of concept, I would say. I think a step in that direction. I'm a big believer in test, learn, and scale. So I think we're going to understand where we need to scale to within the next 6 to 12 months or so. And if that's an investment that we want to make into creating our own, that would be something that would come up through that process.
Yeah, and as a curious person yourself, like outside of the job, just curious, like how you're experimenting with it in your own
It's
life.
so much fun. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad you asked this question. The first experiment I did with AI was reading my, at the time, she was probably 4 years old, my niece, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, a bedtime story. And we created one through AI. And you just kind of give like 3 topics. And I think she came up with a porter potty, a princess, and like a dolphin.
Yeah, they always go to poop. I don't know why all of them go. They start off with poop, and then.
So those are really fun ways to leverage AI. I really am looking at it from more of a creative standpoint. I've done all sorts of AI image creation, and I will say I'm a little judgy about the image creation so far. I'm looking forward to that improving. They cannot get the limbs right. I have a lot of three-legged humans.
They have the hands and the fingers are always weird.
Yeah, it's a little odd. Yeah, so I'm having fun with it in my personal life.
So, as far as content creation, in the workplace, how do you have you seen it content creation being used in a positive way when you're kind of like using those AI tools?
Yeah, that's something I'm very sensitive to because again, I know there's a lot of larger conversations around the displaced people that AI will ultimately lead to. Again, I don't. Maybe there are some efficiencies that will come over time. However, I don't believe, again, unless you want to kind of follow the sea of sameness or create your own proprietary solution, I think it's dangerous to rest solely on AI to carry the weight of your brand, tone, visual connection points with the consumer. I think there's also a risk that AI is presenting into the world around our reality checks. We've lived through this over generations and generations. Like if I flash back to my youth, there was a lot of conversations around the damage that cover models of 17 magazine were putting on the generation of girls coming up that always look perfect, right? Now we're just kind of 10xing that or 100xing that with this tool. I constantly am seeing images where I'm like, oh my gosh, that is the most beautiful place or house or kitchen or where do I go to see this and it's fake? And that's just such a disappointing experience. So I do think AI is an input again to things like copy and language expression, and then applying your brand voice to it and applying the human touch to it is a way to speed up the work, perhaps. But it's not a replacement for the work.
Yeah. How does that work within at Nature Sunshine?
So, for example, if we have a product that we're developing to go to market, we will leverage it as a way to test different positionings for that product. And then we'll refine it. So we'll get the input from AI, and then we'll iterate upon it with our humans and our human brains and skills. And then we'll put that in to be a territory that we would test. And then out of the test, we'll gravitate towards the one that consumers move towards, and we'll refine that. And we'll refine that leveraging AI again to say, how do we shorthand the product benefits to ensure that we are very, very, very clear on what we're building a solution for and how to connect to the largest territories for our customers. And then we'll put the human to it, and we'll make sure that it's on brand from a language standpoint. We'll make some tweaks. We may not use any of it at all, but we may say that's a territory that AI expressed that's interesting. Let's test a couple of different ways of expressing that on our own. That's the way from a copy standpoint that we're leveraging it. We can also leverage AI and do in our process when it comes to creating mood boards and visual directions of intent, not final creative. But it's a way for us to really communicate a positioning visually, because now we at least have it at our fingertips. It's a lot easier nowadays than it was, when you're Google image searching something very specific. Now you can actually create it, which has been, again, a nice shorthand. Work that was done before, because you're always creating mood boards, you're always image searching, but this helps you short track that, which is an added value for obvious reasons.
Mm-hmm. One of the things Sarah and I have been working on, I guess a lot this year, is just the ability to include more people in the process, and like that's what AI could unlock. I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about just kind of what you see with the innovation process and how AI might be able to democratize some of it.
I think AI can be a substitute's not the right word, a representative of the masses. If you use it in the most simple, basic, off-the-shelf ways, right? So in theory, they're aggregating their responses based on existing information out in the universe, right? So it can be, but I caution. I feel like it has to be an input, not the single solution. If I went to let's just say, for example, if I go to one of my markets and I say, hey, we're designing this new product because AI told us it's going to be important, versus me going to the markets and saying, hey, we're designing this new product because we heard you and you told us that you needed it. Which solution do you think is going to get the most buy-in and credibility? It's not going to be the AI solution. But there's a way behind the scenes that we can absolutely validate. The field came to us and said, we need this product. We go to AI, we validate, is this something that's relevant? And how should we think about this within our business strategy? That's absolutely a great way for us to leverage the tool. So my cautionary tale, and I'm probably repeating myself too much here, is that AI is going to be an amazing added value to businesses, ours included. The cautionary tale is not to replace the human touch and the human connection with it, because I think that's going to water you down, and it's going to lead you to some false assumptions that I think need to be vetted before taken too far.
Yeah. So I guess as a part of the innovation process, so I know like part of what we do is like bring kind of thousands and thousands of consumers into that process. So it is more like, grounded on people, but then using AI agents kind of in the mix who can help, generate different things off of that. I'm curious what agents would you add into the mix, into the innovation process that could explore different avenues for you. If you could design your own team around, what those agents might look like, what might they do, or explore some different paths that maybe you can't do today, with kind of the current capacity.
Yeah. I think there's something really interesting about our raw materials. And the reality is we globally source our materials, and the materials that we use, because we are a herbal and botanical based company, are scarce, and environmental, climate, factors absolutely pose a risk to our raw materials. There's a lot of conversation in the news right now about chocolate. And chocolate has had, I think it was something like 2 to 3 bad production seasons. So we're all seeing the cost of chocolate rise for consumers, right? So if you could use an agent to help predict and create this convergence of climate and raw materials and sourcing territories, that could be a really interesting use case. That could absolutely help us understand, are we innovating in the direction of a massive headwind that we need to raise a caution flag against? Or are we innovating in a place where we are going to see more materials stabilize and be accessible to us? That's one example, I would say, of something that I would love to build into our innovation process.
Is there any interest that you would have, or just if you wanted to create an agent of yourself? Like our time is finite, right? But
Yes.
like tapping into your the way that you see things, the ideas that you have, the way that you're solving problems. Yeah, I mean, just kind of to explore with you a little bit around what seems interesting about creating your, Sarah Crockett AI, and like, would you want people to collaborate with it?
Gosh, that is fascinating. You know what? I'm a big believer in gut. My gut says heck no, run the other way. And the reason why I feel, as I'm kind of pulling my own insights together around this, I would sure hate to believe that I'm giving license for my opinions and approvals and alignment through a AI system versus myself as a human being, right? So by creating that, I'm sending a signal, right? Like, here, I've just scaled my capabilities digitally for you. So hey, what would Sarah say in this strategy discussion? What's Sarah's decision on this topic? Would I trust that to be the replacement? Selfishly, I'd be losing out on the experience of that conversation and pushing myself, and creating maybe some stagnation in my own development, which would be a risk to my future. And B, I just don't trust it as a sole guide. As an input, interesting. If I could have it for myself, just to be like, all right, what would my predictive behaviors be in this situation? So I know if I'm deviating extremely or slightly or very much in line, that'd be fun. That's like my fairy tale use of AI. But I wouldn't want it to be available more vast than myself.
Are there any, I guess, areas that would be in bounds if others utilized it? So if you wanted to not get alignment from from what you're doing, but also you wanted to collaborate with it.
If it could be a value add to somebody's experience, for example, I can take my collective career and personal and education experience and bottle it up and give it to somebody to say, hey, I really like the path that this person was on. I wonder how they got there and what some of those choices were. If I could give that to somebody, sure, great. Caution, don't make your decisions based on that alone. But as a guide, absolutely. I think that could be really interesting. I get to have a lot of awesome conversations with up and coming talent who's either just starting their collegiate career or about to end and are really trying to figure out where to go. If something like that existed for them, whether it's me or somebody way more impressive, like that could be really cool and helpful and interesting.
Well, we've been talking about some real Black Mirror type subjects here. Curious, with that in mind, with the organizations that you've worked with, what is like the potential anxiety and also literacy around the AI tools that are out there? And because we hear different things at different levels. There's different policies that are in place in different organizations. Some people are skeptical of kind of what they can do, but kind of curious if you like a temperature check in some of the organizations that you've been in within marketing, kind of where are we, in your opinion?
I think we moved more swiftly out of the disbelief phase with AI as compared to some of these other larger topics. And I think of like the metaverse was dominating the conversation 2-3 years ago. And that was one where I was very public about, like, I happen to be working at a workwear brand, and metaverse was not something I had to think about because we were very hands-on. And I see us moving much swifter into the adoption phase with AI because of the utility that it has already brought to organizations and culture. I think the caution points are still very valid when it comes to, and you read it in the news, right? Like, how do you actually pay people for the content that they're creating? that is now being pulled into these models and used. New York Times lawsuit as an example. I think we're going to see so many versions of that. And so what does that mean as you start to scale these capabilities inside of an organization? That's why I'll go back to that test, learn, scale. I think it's smart for organizations to keep their eyes on what is happening with regard to AI and some of these legal discussions, because things will change. And how they change could impact how you've built it into your systems today, and you may have to reverse engineer some things. But hey, maybe the short-term value is worth it. I think it's going to vary depending on the organization. I think that's one factor with regard to it. I'll go a little philosophical on my second answer to that. There was an article that came out maybe 6 months ago or so, and I think it was also the New York Times. And they talked about this being the first generation in basically the history that is not defining our own culture. And if you think about what that means, we're replicating cultures from the past, whether it's through music or fashion. Or innovation and things of that nature. We're not necessarily able to put our thumb on, oh, this is a reflection of 2020s or 2010s or 2000s even. We're starting to lose that. And I think that there is a risk of this abundance of convenience that's leading us to not have to critically think or critically define ourselves as individuals and thus culture as the result. I have to wonder what the long-term effect of that is going to be. Are we in a generation where we're risking picking up a phone or texting somebody or walking over to a friend and asking their opinion of something and having a really good, healthy discussion? That could be a valuable engagement, especially as we're in this loneliness epidemic. Are we foregoing that for convenience because all of these tools are now at our fingertips? So I do think these things are interrelated, and I think there is a macro culture and humanitarian risk that we're largely on our way towards that really needs to be at the forefront of the discussion.
Sarah, can you maybe share a couple, I guess, just like the future outlook and some maybe trends or also predictions around the space? What is going to be happening at the tail end of this year? We're in the loneliness epidemic, but I think a lot of consumers also have looked to brands and companies to kind of help them codify like some of the feelings and thoughts and take actions on those things. And just curious how maybe technology or different approaches to, quote unquote marketing are building some of those relationships I think people are craving.
I love being able to do predictions. I listen to predictions all the time. I've never actually been able to get them.
Spot.
So let's do this. This is my chance. Do not mess it up. Okay. I do think that the private sector is going to continue to play a very meaningful role in creating connections with people. This goes back to the conversation around the Vogue Gen Z funnel flattening article. I do fundamentally believe that brands can create a convergence of people around a topic, and forge those connections. I do think that's going to happen. I would predict that AI, despite all the legal challenges that are certainly going to continue through this year, next year, and the year after, I think AI is going to stay. And I think it's going to be a largely adopted capability that goes from the public sector to the private sector and everywhere in between. So I absolutely see that. You see that in the stock markets and how they're valuing these companies and things of that nature as well. I think Reddit just went public, right? I think Reddit as an example of a community platform, and I'll use that as the example for community and connections. I think Reddit's going to be probably the stock of the year. And I think that's because of the connections that it makes for consumers, because of the adoption that Gen Z has taken to this platform, and because of how it's being leveraged outside of its platform, if you just look at Google results and things of that nature. But I think Reddit at its core is a community forum. And that says that people still need this connection, digitally, physically, and brands have an opportunity as we swing away from growth hacking to growth through connection. I think we can design our ways into creating points of connection for like-minded consumers that can help us step by step show that you're not alone in this world and that there's actually value in human to human.
Love it. Those are great predictions.
Yeah.
So
let's circle back at the end of the year. You'll have to come back on, so we'll check.
We'll see.
Well, Sarah, this was awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Can you let our listeners know where they can find out more about Nature's Sunshine?
Yeah, absolutely. Check us out, naturesunshine.com. First and foremost. And of course, we're active on all of the social media platforms. Feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. I share news about our businesses and our internal culture as well. So that's also a place that you can learn more.
Awesome. I think we're going to launch sarahcrockett.ai together. So
all right,
got that to look forward to.
That's terrifying.
Awesome. Right. Thanks so much, Sarah. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks.
Great conversation.
Well, that was a great interview with Sarah, but I'd love to hear more about Google Next and kind of what's happening.
Thursday, the 11th, we'll be broadcasting live from stage, sharing all these new features without telling you too much. I really think this is extremely disruptive to how work gets done around research, innovation, exploration. It's a really unique and novel approach that still puts the consumer at the center of everything that you're creating around. So as a designer, researcher, innovator myself, like I just absolutely love what this release holds. And it's the biggest thing we've ever done. So it's taking a year's worth of work that we've put into this, across the world. And, for the hundreds of brands we're working with, and making it a reality. So I think I'm really excited to be on stage to share with the world all of our collective efforts. Sarah, you included. We're a big part of this. So
yeah, it's exciting. And if you haven't already, go to verve.com to follow along with our story. So that's going to do it for this episode of AI Powered by People. This show is produced by Steve Berkowitz and brought to you by Verve. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next Tuesday.